I did not want to teach. And it's funny how God has its miracle ways of working back in, knowing that I did not want to take that path to teach.
Right.
I loved what science stood for and the essence of chemistry and being in a lab, but not necessarily teaching. What else am I going to do? What other path am I going to take? Came time, it was junior year, and had a professor or a teacher that really influenced me in what design looked like, what graphic arts look like, what does that communication look like. And she had me take a couple classes at a local community college in graphic design. I believe that's what they were in. And so it really changed my perspective on, okay, I can design, I can take the elements of what I liked about chemistry and being in a lab and making sure that things are laid out appropriately and becoming more creative in that aspect. It's still formulaic in a way, but I knew that getting into school, I hadn't taken a lick of art in high school. So how was I going to get into art school without a portfolio?
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Mary Catherine Reinert. Mary Catherine is the founder of Fortissima Brands, a strategic branding firm specializing in elevating boutique hospitality and lifestyle brands through multi-sensorial marketing experiences and fractional CMO services. She earned a Bachelor of Arts in Graphic Design from Kansas State University and started Fortissima Brands a few months later. You can learn more about Mary Catherine at fortissimabrands.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Mary Catherine.
MC, welcome to the Corporate Couch this Friday, April 4th, 4/4/2025. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
This is so exciting. Great.
Yeah, very cool.
You.
Yeah. Mackie Musavi, one of the greatest people in Kansas City, introduced us.
Right.
So excited to talk to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So
love her. You're going to love this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I love your background. I really just graduated from K-State University and kind of dipped your toe in corporate America and then started your own business. So it's going to be very fun discussion. You're very transparent on social media, but even though people know you fairly well, MC, what would surprise them about you?
I was super shy, super quiet as a child, very much the opposite end of the spectrum as a child, and definitely had to come into my own. But I appreciate being alone and being by myself in certain instances. And so I think having that quality really has helped just even grow into adulthood and business owner and entrepreneur. But yes, a lot of people don't know I was absolutely quiet and shy.
Yeah.
And loved that aspect.
Yeah, very
Maybe
interesting.
that's the Sagittarius in me.
There you go. I'm an Aquarius,
Okay.
and I was quite shy, believe it or not. I was very not shy with people I felt close to, like close friends, family members. But school, even though I did well, I was terrified of raising my hand or getting called on, even though I probably knew the answer most of the time. I didn't want to be wrong and judged, and and all that. So when did you kind of break out into the MC that we all know and love now?
Basically around middle school, I would say. I mean, when you start really learning who your personality is, who your people are, really getting into, hey, I'm going to stand up for myself, or how am I going to broach a certain subject? You know, it really came a time to where it was almost like a light switch went off. And it was like, am I going to stay this shy and quiet forever and not speak up? Or am I going to kind of step outside of my realm, of my box, stand into the light of middle school? You know, we all go through those
Right.
middle school things,
Yeah.
and being who you are, being transparent, being authentic at that time.
Yeah.
And it was welcomed. It was absolutely welcomed from my parents, from schoolmates and teachers. You know, that was a time where being authentic was absolutely welcomed more than
Right.
anything.
Right. Was there an event or a person that kind of pushed you over the line to become more authentic and feel comfortable expressing yourself?
You know, I had a science teacher in middle school. He was so fun. He made school fun. He made
Yeah.
science fun. It was so off the wall and off the cuff. And just to see someone in school, in a school setting, not so serious, not so by the book of what a teacher was and is. And it became almost like, I want to be like him.
Yeah.
I want to be able to let the guards down and kind of show off, you know,
Yeah.
being goofy, being silly, and stepping into the room. So he definitely was an inspiration to really launch who MC is now and what we see now.
Yeah. The
But it
MC
was,
Hammer version of
mhm,
MC.
that's right. And I can get down on that. So
No, I love that. I've always said, and I've had a few teachers that, they just really can change your life. Great teachers. I
Mhm,
mean, in terms of you just always remember a great teacher, and you
mhm,
remember your, seventh, eighth grade science teacher because he or she was fun.
yeah.
And, it's such a great profession that really can mold and impact lives. And,
Mhm.
and they're, unfortunately, underpaid for the most part. But
Absolutely.
that could be a whole nother podcast.
Absolutely.
I think you grew up in Kansas City. Is that true?
Yes,
Yes. So,
sure did.
okay. What was fun for
Yeah.
you growing up? What'd you like to do?
Well, it was the 80s. So, you know, it was hanging out in the hood, hanging out in the neighborhood, knowing that we could kind of run rampant through there, although we lived in an Italian neighborhood to where you weren't doing anything that your parents wouldn't approve of because you were being watched
Oh,
by
yeah.
everyone. But it was a time where we could hang out and run around the neighborhood, and, you know, whether that looked like, you know, on bike or, you know, just hanging, listening to music. Gosh, the music was great. You know, the
Yeah.
influence was great back then. And being raised by the divas and raised by, you know, rap music.
Yeah.
And, you know, my parents loved music, disco and rock, and,
Right.
you know, being heavily influenced by that. And so it gave, you know, us an opportunity, my brother and I, an opportunity to just, you know, be kids in the
Right.
neighborhood.
Yeah, I love that. What is the name of the loudest person in your family?
The name, her
No, just
name.
no uncle or aunt, whatever. You don't have to really reveal them if you don't want to go there.
You know, I have 6 aunts and uncles on one side and 4 aunts and uncles on the other side,
Yeah.
and so
So the family
they're
gatherings are loud.
all loud. There is no one person that is the loudest. I think they're all loud in their own ways, but boy,
Yeah.
it's more passionate than loud.
Yeah, yeah.
Different
I,
perspective on that.
my Uncle Nick was the loudest in my family. I had 2 Uncle Nicks, but one Uncle Nick was really loud and knew everything. I mean, the guy he was Google before Google. I mean, the guy, at least, he thought he knew everything.
Everything. Yep.
Very successful businessman, though. Yeah. So, any aspirations? I mean, when you're riding your bike around the neighborhood, you think, I'm going to start my own brand marketing agency. You know, when I'm an adult, what was kind of your goals, if you had any, at that point?
Absolutely not, because my parents had started a restaurant with my dad's two brothers. And so I grew up in a restaurant since the age of 9. And
Wow.
so I knew what that life looked like. And honestly, my parents pretty much steered us away from starting a business or becoming
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, knowing that that lifestyle just wasn't sustainable for a family. And I think they learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
We grew up in the restaurant,
Yeah.
and it's still in existence today. So that's
Oh,
really
wow.
exciting to see that.
Do you want to?
But
What is the name of the restaurant? Can you tell us?
yeah, Giovanni's Italian Deli and Pasta.
Oh, nice. And where's that
Yep,
at?
it's in the Northland.
Okay. I'll have,
So if you're in
I'll have to make
Northland,
a trek up there.
Kansas
I'm
City.
in South Kansas City, but
Still
always
the
love.
same recipes.
Yeah, love it. Giovanni's.
But I
Um,
knew, even then at a very young age of 9 years old, that that wasn't the path for me, or at least I was
yeah.
not going to select that path. I honestly wanted to be a science teacher, and that really helped get into what science looked like and how, influenced by that teacher specifically, but really resonating with how is science created, and chemistry and physics,
Yeah.
and knowing all these formulaic ways of doing things. And that has obviously helped me so much in what I do today,
Yeah.
becoming so formulaic.
Yeah, I love that. So when you entered K-State as a freshman, kind of a science degree in your future, or did you go to graphic arts immediately?
So I actually, just to kind of peel the onion back, I actually lied and cheated my way into K-State.
Here we go. All right.
If we're going to be honest, let's do it.
Yeah, let's
Um,
let's
I I I really I in high school I knew that becoming a science teacher or a chemistry teacher, that really was my focal point and focus. I really didn't want to teach kids. I did not want to teach, and it's funny how God has its miracle ways of working back in, because now we teach so many clients, which I absolutely love and adore, the
right.
relationships that we have now. But knowing that I did not want to take that path to
Mm,
teach. I
right.
loved what science stood for and the essence of
Right.
chemistry, and being in a lab, but not necessarily teaching. Went to an all girls high school here in Kansas City, St. Teresa's Academy. But I knew I was in yearbook. And so I knew that what else am I going to do? What other path am I going to take? It came time, it was junior year, and had a professor or a teacher that really influenced me in what design looked like, what graphic arts look like, what does that communication look like. And she had me take a couple classes at a local community college in graphic design. I believe that's what they were in. And surprisingly, that they let me. That was, looking back, I'm like, I'm not sure how I got in at 16 or 17 years old, but
Wow.
was able to take a couple courses through that college. And so it really changed my perspective on, okay, I can design, I can take the elements of what I liked about chemistry, and being in a lab and making sure that things are laid out appropriately, and becoming more creative in that aspect. It's still formulaic in a way. But I knew that getting into school, I hadn't taken a lick of art in high school.
Right.
So how was I going to get into art school
Right.
without a portfolio?
Right.
So I used a classmate's art portfolio to get into K-State Art School.
Wow. There we go. Uh, I hope they do not rescind your bachelor's of arts in graphic design, but
Me
I'm
too.
sure.
Me too. But I
So
learned.
you don't need the degree anymore, so it's all good. Um, God, I love that. Love that. Well, you did what you needed to do to,
Mhm.
get in, and that's great.
Take a
So,
risk. The
yeah,
risk came
yeah.
sooner rather than later.
Lo- So you graduate from K-State, and how did you get your first job at a school?
So I graduated in 2007. I knew that that was on the brink of a very tough economy and a tough situation. I actually had a position out in Las Vegas working for a company that produced billboards. And so I was extremely excited to leave Kansas City. It was a dream. My parents already knew that. I think the whole family was praying at church and praying the rosary multiple times over, because I was going to be the first one out of the family to leave sort of the nest of both sides.
It's almost unheard of.
Yes, very much so. And it all of a sudden during that time of transition, they came back and wanted to renegotiate the salary. And I knew that I was not going to be able to survive. It was not even enough to pay for where I was going to live.
Right.
And at that time, I just knew in my heart of hearts that I could not take that chance to move out there with no one, without support, boots on the ground, to figure that out at 21, 22 years old. I just knew that what was coming down the economy, I could feel it.
Right.
So I stayed in Kansas City and took a position with a packaging company, which I am so grateful, and I owe a lot of my career to now, of what I've learned from them. I took a position with them as a graphic designer and knew that it was time to start a corporate career. Learned everything I possibly could have and was immersed in what packaging, a lot of people think, hey, it's just a brown box or it's just a display. But at the same time, that takes a lot of engineering. It takes a lot of trial and error to make sure the weight of it, the size of it, how it's being, in function and in process, and knowing the kind of material that's being used. And there were so many elements that went into that. I was fascinated, and I became a sponge.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did that job come about? Like, so you made the right decision. You would have been stuck in Vegas, probably lost your job during, the '08 recession.
Absolutely.
How did you navigate into the packaging company in Kansas City?
Yeah. So I did the old, hard knocks, boots on the ground, and found a position and really appreciated that they were a local, privately owned. It felt very comfortable. It was a family owned business at the time. And so it felt just like family. Yeah. And I knew that if I could kind of see where it took me, it wasn't a dream to become a packaging designer or graphic designer, but at the same time, I felt like it was almost destined to be.
Right.
Because I was so in touch with and being taken on client facing meetings and going down to Walmart headquarters down in Bentonville and being, having those opportunities at a very young age to sit in front of clients, know how to position myself, know how to talk, learning all of these elements of a business without being the face of a business.
Right.
And that's a major responsibility. Looking back, I don't know how many 22-year-olds could get that opportunity right out of college.
Yeah. Do you attribute that to your Sicilian roots? Just hard driving, no bullshit type of person?
Absolutely. It was fun because my boss at the time, he was Polish, and so it was it was quite the personality show.
Oh, wow.
In our design lab, what we called it. But, I attribute every bit of my success to him and to really layers of what that had provided me at such an early age, and being able to still take out a business loan. I knew in my heart of hearts that my job could be eliminated very quickly because creative jobs were going by the wayside in 2007, 2008. And was able to pick up a business loan for $50, go to the library, pick up a book, How to Start a Business 101. I think I still own that book today.
Wow.
I actually.
So you stole it from the library?
Well, no, I bought it from Barnes & Noble.
I see a pattern here, MC. I see a little bit of a pattern.
I will cheat and lie for whoever I need to, but cheat and lie for any metrics, I'll tell you that.
So I'm going to ask you a question based on all your experience in, in design and packaging, and we'll talk about you starting the business. But so I was employee 55 at Sprint PCS. It was a $10 billion funded startup, 40% owned by Sprint, now T-Mobile, and the other 60% were three cable companies: TCI, Cox, and Comcast. I think Cox and Comcast are still around, and TCI was bought by maybe AOL. I don't know. Anyhow, and we were it was small, but we were, it was the new wireless spectrum, so it was all brand new technology, and I still remember, we're in the room. It's all the C-suite. It was myself, maybe about 20 people, and they were talking about the packaging for the phone, right? So,
Yeah.
and one was a black box, and one was a red box, and and you'll see where I'm going with this in a second, but. And, like the chief network officer saying, yeah, my opinion is this. So how do you deal with clients? Because everybody has an opinion on, logos, because they're an expert, because, they buy stuff. So how do you, you talk about teaching. So, how do you, because, doesn't mean they have great taste, and it's not the right thing to do. So talk about your process with clients. I'm kind of skipping ahead, but I'm just curious, since you were talking about packaging.
Absolutely. And when it comes to what is being packaged, and especially to represent a brand itself, it's going back to foundational practices. It's owning who and what you are and why that matters. And it's going back to, what is our authentic approach to our audience? Yes, we are a brand, and a brand should be able to walk down the street and be its own personality and have its own set of values and its own set of goals. But at the same time, we look at it from a psychology standpoint, making sure that, hey, how is that going to resonate with our client at that time? Because not only does a phone serve its purpose for now, but it's continuing to serve a purpose as you go along in your daily life as well. And so, especially for packaging, for instance, it's how is that, representing our company, because it is client facing, and how they're touching it and how they're feeling it, and how if they can read, what are the pros and cons of what font is being used, what colors are being used, what the printing process is on that. And so it's getting in depth into the weeds of the sensorial experience of a client too.
Right. So, you're at this packaging company, you have a great mentor, which is, fantastic. So what was the idea behind you starting your own business? I mean, you're in your, early 20s, to say the least. And most people don't take that leap, sometimes never, but, definitely at a younger age, it's a bold move. So talk about that process for you.
Sure. So at 22, taking out a business license, $50, it was nothing at that point in time to say, hey, I'm an established business. I literally was raised by the school of hard knocks. I would go door to door, knocking on spas, salons, restaurants, insurance agents, anyone I could get my hands on. I would just target different areas on my lunch break or on, after hours of working, and being able to say, hey, I am a graphic designer. Do you need help with web design, collateral design, logo design? Are you doing a refresh? And so it was really helpful. I still have a lot of the clients that I had from day one. It was helpful that I could just kind of show up and say, this is what I do. Do you have a need, or is there something that I can help with? And it wasn't so salesy and cold calls-y, but at the same time, it was able to get in front of their face and get into their atmosphere and their environment to have a conversation, to just say, hey, do you need some help? Because I knew design jobs were going by the wayside. I mean, creatives were.
Right.
And so it truly gave me the opportunity, having that leg up, to just go out and ask.
Yeah, I love that. You're like a side hustle, side gig pioneer, right? You're doing this 2008, 9-ish time frame. So at what point was it that you say, okay, I'm all in on my business, and and you leave the package design company you were working at?
My CPA actually was the person to push me out of the plane. He just said, we can no longer call this a hobby. Right. We're now going to have to start doing this more, legit as a business, and taking out an LLC. And I was 24 at the time.
Yeah.
And so it really was my CPA to push me out of the plane.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have, because I probably would have retired from that company. I was that invested in what they were doing, their mission, their values. I was so invested to the core of who they were.
Right.
And, I loved that relationship. It was very hard for me to leave that industry.
Yeah.
And I look back and I think, if I didn't pull the trigger at that time, I don't think I ever would have.
Right.
And against, not that my parents or my husband was against me starting a business or having a business on my own, but it was hard for them to see, knowing that, 10, 15 years earlier, it was so hard on our family and what that looked like.
Right.
How was that going to be different? That was the conversation around the table. How is life going to look different as an entrepreneur, as an owner, as a sole designer at that time?
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, just to have that. I mean, obviously your CPA, not forced you, but it's still, you're leaving a W-2 job. You got a biweekly paycheck.
Yep.
And the security. You loved working there. You had a great mentor. So was there just a gut feel also by you to say, even though and most things that we do fear, we should do, right? So was it something internal also for you?
More than anything, it was, if I'm doing this much on a couple hours a day, what could I do? What is my potential if I invested 8 hours a day? And I think that was my fight. I think that was, my call to say, hey, if I can do this in a little amount of hours, who can I be in 8 hours a day?
Right.
And I gave myself a timeline. I did. I'm by the book. I'm very structured. I like to be, have things under control and have a timeline and stick to that. I take that very seriously. But I gave myself a timeline. It was like sink or swim. I knew I could probably call them back and say, hey, it didn't work out.
Right. But so you weren't assured of that.
Having the parachute already in check, maybe was a little bit of a security blanket.
Right.
But at the same time, it was time to see what was I really made out of.
Right. So that first year or two, what were kind of the biggest surprises? Again, you're going from a structured environment, benefits, biweekly paychecks, camaraderie with the rest of the team. What was it like for you the first couple of years?
I like being by myself. I appreciate those times. So the loneliness, yes, that set in, but it wasn't as difficult to be alone because it was hard to leave a team, a 7-person team at that time. And, the hardest thing was that I had to be so on call. I had to be so on all the time. Right. And I was like, oh, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to being happy and ready and excited for you when I know you're going to change everything, whatever it was. But, it was so on all the time. And that's wearing.
Yeah.
To not have a team to bounce those ideas off of, a team to kind of come to the table and say, hey, does this make sense? Or does this make sense?
Right.
Or really learning how to navigate pieces and learning how to navigate people too.
Right.
Because you meet a lot of interesting people.
Right. Yeah. So obviously your parents were, entrepreneurs, business owners, so they were probably role models for you. But was there anybody else, whether it's a book or a person or people, that kind of influenced you as you were starting your business and starting to grow it?
Several people. I actually had a studio space. I shared a studio space with a florist in Briarcliff at the time. She was someone I used to cross paths with while I was working in corporate America, knowing we were doing photo shoots and visual styling and how were we going to make packaging look pretty, on a visual standpoint, when we were putting together guides on how Walmart or any of the customers were putting these things together. And her name is Shana Vaughn, and she was so instrumental in being a voice of reason as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman, where I needed to be in the room at, who I needed to be introduced to, taking the chance to have a shared studio space at the time where clients could come to the table, and having this environment to where it wasn't out of my home. I was able to have a space for them to come to and be welcome to the table. And that was so pivotal in what business looked like, because then you could show up to work every day. You could show up and be ready for clients or for the work at hand. She was very instrumental from the start, but it also gave me an idea into, okay, what does this look like 5 years down the road? Goal planning, vision planning, looking at the business as a business. And so it was perspective. It was definitely a perspective change. Of course, a ton of books have come across. I love to read, and I'm definitely a student of my craft and a student of, well, a lot of crafts, but I still am a sponge when it comes to learning. And so there've been a lot of pivotal books, the reason for a business name change, the reason for so many things that have happened just throughout 17, almost 18 years of having a business. And so, but definitely to take the leap of faith and making sure that a business could operate during that time of an economic recession, that was difficult.
Right.
That was difficult to make it work.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
What were some of the books that influenced you over the years?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones that I still actually reference today, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Have you read that one?
Yeah, great book.
Great book. Love that one. Stephen Pressfield, his books have been instrumental. I always go back to Marty Neumeier. He does a lot of branding psychology and marketing psychology. So I love taking the spin on that wheel.
Yes. Stephen Pressfield has a great story. I mean, his career is, he was a taxi driver into his early 40s. I love his books. There's only maybe 2 or 3 books I have finished and then immediately started to read it again from the beginning.
Yep.
The Legend of Bagger Vance by Stephen Pressfield was one of those. He's a great writer, a great thinker. The War of Art is a great book.
Yes.
And
Put your ass where your heart needs to be.
Right.
I always gift that book.
Yeah.
That's a good gift one.
I have not read that.
You got to read that one.
I'm going to write that down.
That's a good gut check too.
Yeah, that's funny. And speaking of The Big Leap, Mackie, as well as a close friend, like within like a week of each other, recommended that book to me. And so I read it. So that was another.
It's a massive book for me.
Yeah,
that's a big book for me.
So you talked about changing the name. So obviously we know what the name is now. Fortissima. Is that correct pronunciation? I'm Italian. Hopefully I can do that. I do not speak Italian, obviously, but what was the initial name, and kind of walk us through the evolution of changing it?
So the business actually started out as Blissful Prints. It was more of the graphic design things and event design and corporate design. And so I really appreciated the printing process. I got really into meeting a lot of really unique printers around the city, always try and support local. That's a huge thing of mine when it comes to printing, and learned a lot from that, doing a lot of tours for printing presses. And it started as that for a number of years, changed the name to BP Creative Group because it was becoming more than just event design and one-off logos and one-off collaterals. It was becoming more of a group. I had a team. It was easier for individuals to understand or businesses to understand that we were a group. We were a creative group at that time, and loved it and would have stuck with it. But it was the big leap that really was pivotal in changing the name to what it is now. And in my mind, I always knew that it was going to change at some point. When I sat down with my grandmother 17, 18 years ago across the table, I mean, her and I were going through books and books and books trying to figure out a name and how to start a business and what that looked like. I knew that it would end up changing, and I wanted it to stand alone. I wanted it to have its own unique characteristics and have its own personality, and it was not attached to me. I wanted it to be able to live and breathe on its own. And so taking the leap, financial leap, and leap to change the name everywhere it was and was a huge undertaking. It's like naming a child and knowing that at some point in time, this individual is going to learn to fly without me.
Right.
And it needed to have everything that we build for clients, brand foundations, and what a brand really is and why it's in existence. It needed to have its own unique characteristics to let it be.
Yeah.
That's why she's loud.
Yeah, loud and proud. I love it. No, I think the name's great, and your website, and the branding, which should be good because that's what you do for clients. But I do love it. So talk about what I love. I know the tagline for your company, a strategy-driven branding and marketing firm, but it seems strategy has always been a part of your life. I'd love that you can pick up a 7-10 split with some strategy there. But, I would say most marketing agencies, it would be easy if you're a graphic designer, like in the early days, and not even think about strategy, if you know where I'm going. Because one, you're just doing the works, but strategy involves a deeper dive into the kind of more thoughtful, like, what does this look like long term? And then what are the tactics, which, graphic design would be part of that to get there. But talk about that, and how has your strategy knowledge and wisdom evolved over the years?
Yeah, so definitely at the beginning of time, what did graphic design, what did branding and marketing look like? Well, it was so focused on the audience, the customer. What are our visuals, the color palette, making sure that we are trendy and modern and in line with what's hot today. And that causes a lot of havoc internally to keep jumping around. That is not a sustainable process. And I knew, especially when developing our process that we use today, years ago, that it was extremely important to weave in strategy, because we become a business partner at the end of the day. We are seated at the table making business decisions. And it's not just appealing toward the ideal customer, but how does our culture feel? How do we feel internally? How is this representing us when it walks out the door, if it's a product? Or what does that service relay when it is shared with a client, not only in the pain that they're in right now, but how is it continuing to provide a solution as they move through and word of mouth and leave us and become advocates and loyalists? And strategy was such a piece that was missing with a lot of agencies, because to whip out a website or content or logos or color palettes without purpose, without meaning, without intention or transparency or authenticity means nothing in the long run.
Right.
That's when we become so friction with what is going on with the brand, because there is no purpose behind it.
Right.
It's almost like a straitjacket that you're trying to get out of.
Right.
And how did we get into this, knowing that, we built a logo or we rebranded without going back to the core foundation and weaving those strategic pieces back through it? And especially when it comes to ideal clients and ideal audiences, it's looking at multiple versions of them, because it's not just one ideal client or sector that we're after, but we're actually after quite a few. And it's taking the time to really make sure that our values are present and transparent with that relationship. Weaving strategy for sure has played a role from bowling back in the day. That's the only sport I can beat my husband in, by the way.
Love it.
But playing Tetris, I mean, being able to play Scrabble and know that board games were such a hot thing, and
your lasagna,
layering lasagna for sure. There is a way to do that makes it.
Next time you do that, I want you to video it and send it to me, because that is I make my aunt's sauce and meatball recipe, and then I make lasagna. But always looking for new ways to. The lasagna is just lasagna, but it's about the sauce and meatballs that go on top.
No, there's such a connection with every player.
So, the other thing I noticed, and I know you do keynotes and speaking engagements, and one of the topics is data-driven, marketing and how to build a data-driven brand. I've been in marketing and sales analytics basically my entire career. And most agencies don't talk about that, but talk about and this maybe from your science background, right? But yeah, talk about that, because most agencies wouldn't kind of, profess that's a strength or even mention it.
It has to come from ultimately, what are your goals? And looking at it from a standpoint of, sometimes those goals are not transactional. A mission and a vision should clarify what that is. And that then leans itself toward, what metrics are we going to track? How are we tracking that? Why does that matter at the end of the day? When it comes to building a business and a brand that's outward, how are we utilizing those metrics to make decisions in our business? And whether that's how they're using the product or service and what that looks like, the engagement looks like afterward, or if we're, looking at social media metrics and looking at why that is important for us to continue monitoring those. Is it important to keep marketing on certain platforms that aren't aligned with where our audience is anyways? Why are we continuing to add things on our plate that aren't necessarily important for our bottom line, for our internal goals, for the engagement of how we're working with our clients or customers? So there comes a time to where that conversation is extensive, because it matters so much more when we can make those decisions and have clarity around that. And then we know what we're doing moving forward. We have a vision forward for the next generation, or who we're hiring, or why that matters.
Right. Yeah, I'm just shocked that you still see articles out there about how a lot of marketing people are not, they don't care about it. It's like, they love it's like Mad Men, they're just the creative and all this, but does it move the needle sales wise? And you need to measure it. I mean, like, we were implementing back in the early 90s at Sprint, data-driven strategies so we can measure things, right? I'm not saying you don't do brand, awareness and other things, but you're questioning why we need, $100,000 for this project, but it's gonna, it's gonna be a 10 to, 15 to 1 ROI. So, but you put a billboard in downtown Kansas City and pay for that, and you're like, there's not even a call to action,
right?
Type thing,
right?
So, yeah, very interesting.
Well, and it's we keep layering on more things because we're avoiding something.
Right.
We are avoiding looking at the numbers, facing the facts, looking in the mirror, not rebranding, not taking opportunities or chances to partner with aligned businesses that complement ours. Yeah. I mean, we are avoiding when we start thinking that, we need to keep marketing, keep up with the Joneses of social media, or, tailoring our website or tweaking our website time and time again, rather than going out and speaking with our customers, going out and speaking with other aligned businesses, or getting a new perspective to impact our bottom line.
And I think a lot of it too is people don't want to be held accountable. Like it's easier just to do stuff and like, oh yeah, whatever, but
right.
being held accountable is different. But talk about, do you see a common thread with like a new client in terms of they're fearful of this or, and a lot of business owners, are not strategic. A lot of business owners are not, they're not marketing / salespeople, which, they're good at what they do.
Absolutely.
But talk about that. Is there some common themes you see?
The biggest one is time. They're just not really sure where to start.
Right.
And what's going to make the most impact.
Right.
And a lot of times it's looking at, well, do you know where your audience is?
Right.
I mean, it's going back to some of the bare bone questions of how are we looking at what our marketing plan and strategy looks like for our ideal client, and how does that resonate and align with what our values are?
Right.
And it's working and weaving in those strategic touch points of marketing, because time is of the essence. I mean, we don't have a lot of time.
Right.
But given more of a plan, given more of a strategy, knowing in depth the hierarchy of functional and emotional needs of our clients, that's where we can kind of uncover and find these hidden gems of, okay, this is going to give you a little bit more precision in what you're doing for marketing. Time is always a hot button when it comes to new clients. And we've been speaking with new clients lately that are looking for a succession plan or looking for the next layer to take over their business. And what does that look like? And how can they put a new foot forward and continue to make good business happen?
Right.
They've already perfected the craft.
Right.
Now it's time to perfect the relationship and the connection that they have with their audience.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest change in actually your clients have been since you started the business to now, especially post-COVID, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, we transitioned the business for sure from being a one-off agency pre-COVID. So clients could come and rally around and say, hey, I just need a new brand, a new website. And the clients that we entertain now are looking more for that long-term impact, looking more for sustainability, not only in the marketplace, but for their culture as well, and what that looks like on how they're hiring, how they're bringing in new individuals to partner with them, because it's such an investment. When new employees or new hires and new team members come aboard, they're also representing the company and the values, not only the work that's being produced. And so the type of clientele now really is looking more intentional, more in depth on what their presence is, not only externally, but internally. And it's absolutely crucial to come from it from that standpoint. We're now sitting around the table as a key member of their organization, looking at these strategies, ensuring that they have longevity, making sure that there's still a word of mouth brand or business, because unfortunately the bread aisle is getting a little heavier. A lot of these aisles are becoming a little, saturated with businesses that aren't necessarily doing it the way that you do it, or what you're producing. And so how can you continue with these businesses to continue to be a word of mouth business?
Right.
Such a huge piece of marketing that people ignore because there's so many different outlets and touch points.
Yeah. I love that you touched on the internal part for internal company, because I love culture, and I think that, it's a big part of your brand, right? And you want to have that great internal employee culture. What are some specifics you've done in that area? If you can provide some examples just to help with the company culture.
The biggest thing is looking at surveys, believe it or not, external surveys from clients' perspectives, and then bringing that back to the team and making sure that training and resources and capacity are at the levels that your C-suite think they're at, but they may not be. And it's working a little bit more intently to say, hey, this is from an outside perspective. You actually have this knowledge at your fingertips if only you would survey your clients or survey your VIP clients and get that more intentional approach to say, what does that look like from an outside? And what can we do on the inside to keep moving the needle in what our culture looks like? And that's represented because that's coming straight from the horse's mouth. And so we can't lie. We can't, dismiss that doesn't exist. That's to help us. That's to get us more in line with, okay, are these representatives of our values and our mission that we're doing every day? Because that's what we should be doing every day. But if those words are not represented in their review, their testimonial, throughout their survey, then we know there needs to be a culture shift or a change, looking at the resources, training, capabilities around that.
Yeah. No, I love that. So in our first conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, you talked about a possible book in your future. You want to tell the audience about that?
Yeah. So in the process of writing a book, it's actually a no BS guidebook to making sure that we are stripping away some of those complications that are holding our own potential and our own power back from a business standpoint, from a brand standpoint, and going into a diva mindset. I mean, every brand is a diva and has a diva inside of them. And so how are we making sure that we are not complicating the process of branding and marketing? How are we, using these external validations instead of owning who we are through logic, through that lasting impact, to make sure that we are authentic and transparent out there? And really, this is an opportunity to just have a pulse check and a gut check on, can I flip to it? Can I make sure that we're in line and staying really focused and staying true to who we are at the end of the day? Because there's always going to be the trend treadmill, the tactic treadmill. Those things, the shiny object syndrome is never going to go away. It never will.
Right.
And that's the beautiful thing about evolution and changing and AI and all these sparkly, shiny things. But how are we staying true to the heart of our business?
Right.
Making sure that we're not complicating the process in the meantime.
Be true to the strategy, Yeah.
It can be all fun and games if you allow it.
No, I love that. So I did see the DIVA mindset. So talk a little bit about that on your website. So,
Yeah. Well, definitely an influence to the name, using the Fortissima name, changing it to the A, and making sure that was really prevalent in the loud aspect of how we're building brands and deconstructing brands. That's our D. And so really infusing who a brand is throughout every piece of material that they have, whether that be from collateral or on a digital standpoint. And then, absolutely adding in that vigor of who a brand is, making sure that, you own who you are, you say what you mean, and you mean what you say at the end of the day, and activating every piece of marketing. And so the diva mindset for us in how we bring clients through that is such a almost life-changing process that they now rely on who their brand is instead of shoving that brand guide up on the shelf and never looking at it, because that should be the guidebook. That should be the wayfinder. And then reevaluating what our audience looks like, making sure there are certain touch points to reevaluate that. Their hierarchy and needs, understanding them inside and out absolutely is crucial. But if your brand is going to walk down the street alongside of them, then are you owning who you are out there in the world?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you have a brand promise and you need to keep it, right?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So excited about your book. What's next for you and your company? What's the future hold?
Yeah. So continuing to go out and speak, spread the good news, spread the good word of branding and marketing and authenticity, but creating more workshops, creating more masterminds. This is so important to us. We do these deep dive strategy sessions, the Diva Mindset. And so we want to make sure that, hey, if we need to get into, lift up our sleeves and get into the weeds of creating that strategy right from the start, giving them an opportunity, their in-house marketing team, a new way, a new perspective to look into that. And so creating more of those masterminds and workshops for them is such a blessing. My heart is so full to be able to step back and say, let's get down to work. Let's come to the table and let's roll up our sleeves and be as transparent and cuss and lay everything out. And we've had, we've had a blast doing them, but more to come in the future. And so we're really excited to continue down that path of just being a strategic partner, business partner, brand partner alongside of them, making sure that they feel like their brand is being heard.
Right. Yeah, I love that, because you are, you're not just a marketing, business partner or brand business, you're a strategic business partner, right? So I love that. I'd love to help a couple groups of people. One, and I'm going to love your answer to this based on what you did right after college, but one's, we're here at April 2025 next month. A lot of recent college or kids are going to graduate from college. Young adults, I should say, are going to graduate from college. What advice do you have for them as they begin their professional career, as well as kind of getting that first post-college job?
Yeah, take a leap of faith into an avenue, into a category you would least expect it. Did I, was I seeking a packaging job? No, but right. It was the best thing to come as a young woman. But I will say, take your head out of the book. And sometimes it's hard to do that because you're coming from an institution or university or an organized way of learning academics. And to this day, I have to catch myself. I have to whip myself out and say, nope, you know enough. You have it. Right. Go out and have a conversation. Make sure that you're refining it enough to where they can understand it. And you have your kind of go-to clients or go-to people in your life to give you that feedback. But take your head out of the book. I became such a junkie with that. I wanted to know enough. I wanted to make sure I could sit across the table and speak the language and speak the jargon and make sure that I was truly aligned with what marketing looked like at the time, instead of saying, hey, your website sucks. You're not getting clients, and this is why. So sometimes you rely on just what your personality is to wake people up.
There you go. I love that advice.
They need that swift kick.
There you go.
Textbook can't teach that. So like my parents always said, you can be book smart, but you can also be street smart too. Yeah.
Spoken like a true Sicilian. I love it. MC, the second group is, once you kind of are in a job, you're usually an individual contributor, but if you want to take that career leap to actually manage people, that, you're responsible for a team and an org chart, what advice do you have for them as they begin that leadership journey?
Yeah, I mean, definitely make sure that you are in touch with a lot of personalities and understanding, what is the psychology behind a lot of different communication styles and personalities. One of the biggest things that helped me was just making sure that I was getting out and talking to people. And then when it came time to really manage people, it helped me immensely just knowing the personality. And I ask a lot of in-depth questions, especially when taking on a new team member, and making sure that their personality is aligned with, hey, can they not only thrive in these situations, but can they also thrive in my situation? Because I got my own situation going on.
Right.
But being able to take the leap of faith of taking a leap of faith as an entrepreneur or as a new business owner, looking at it from, hey, I'm giving myself a deadline. I'm giving myself a timeline. I'm making this happen. I'm committing and recommitting every single day to the vision that I have in mind. And especially with a team around me, this is what's going to facilitate that vision.
Right. Yeah, it's great advice. Yeah, be curious, connect with others. It's great advice. MC, thank you so much for coming on the Corporate Couch this morning. You were great to talk to, and I'm so glad Mackie introduced us.
Yes, me too. Thank you so very much. It was so good. I appreciate it, Jeff.
Gotta love Mary Catherine, MC.
MC.
MC Hammer Time. I mean, she's Fortissima. Yeah.
Good Sicilian.
Loud. Good Sicilian. Back-to-back Sicilians on the Corporate Couch. What about that?
That's right.
We didn't plan that. There's no Italian Heritage Month, is there? Like some other
No, you don't. You
So,
don't need it.
yeah.
You just sort of.
We don't even like have a St. Patrick's Day.
No,
the
you
Italians.
don't. You don't have a
We
flag.
used to have Columbus Day. That was kind of like Italian, but then
They took that away
Columbus.
from you.
Columbus got a disgrace. Anyhow, let me digress. MC was so good. I mean, she had a career. I don't even know if I should tell how she got into K-State. I mean, she told it, but it was
She told it, and boy, it surprised me.
I love her innovation, though, innovative strategies to get what she wanted.
And her honesty
Like
about it.
And honesty, like a good Sicilian. No, but she really, I mean, so mature and wise for her age. Like she got a job with this packaging company and got to work with like Walmart and one of the early pioneers of side gig, side hustle. Started her own like digital marketing agency, doing websites. I go, well, what decided? When did you decide I'm going to do this full time and quit the packaging company? She goes, my accountant told me I had to do it. I was making too much money.
Making too much money. You can't call it a hobby anymore.
That's a good problem to have, I guess. But no, I just, you and I can relate to her. Like most marketers and especially agencies are not data driven, and not only is she kind of a data driven. She's a strategist, which is great, and she loves science in school, and that got her kind of in the math mold, I think, and numbers. But and the other thing I really enjoyed talking to her about was how she helps her clients in not only the external facing marketing and the measurement of it, the culture of the company. It begins in the hiring process. So really, it's all marketing. From the employees you hire, the stories you tell them, the stories you tell your current employees, and everything has to align with the company's mission and values. And she's a big advocate of that. And I loved what she said. Like it's marketing strategy is really the business strategy. We're really business consultants, and I totally get that. I mean, like she would make Seth Godin proud in terms of what she's doing with her clients, and really having a marketing strategy really become the business strategy or a large part of it. What'd you get out of the episode?
It was a great interview. She seems like a wonderful person. The whole naming of her Fortissima, it's like in your face. It's like loud and proud. It's like, this is what I am. This is what it's going to be, which I thought was really interesting. One of the things that she did differently than a lot of other people, we talk a lot when we're sitting on the couch about the career paths that people take, that it's usually a zigzag path, that you get out of college with a degree of X, whatever it is, and then you go off and do this thing, and then you get a job doing that thing, and then you do something else, and you finally land on something. She did not zigzag. She zigged, but she never did zag. So she got out of college, got a job essentially designing cardboard boxes. That's really what she did. She designed cardboard boxes for Walmart,
Right.
and since she was designing cardboard boxes for Walmart, she decided, well, I'll go off and do some brand strategies for somebody else. And then, like you said, she ended up making so much money on that. Her accountant said, you can't call it a hobby anymore. You have to make yourself an LLC and actually do it right. And, okay, all right, I'll do that. And that was it. And that's where she landed. And as far as we're concerned, that's where she's going to stay for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And I think that's remarkable. But that shows our audience that we like to pride ourselves in the variety of people that we have on the couch, that you have all this zigging and zagging going on in all these different careers and everything. But every once in a while you find somebody that lands what they should have been doing from the very first, and they do it. And that's exactly what Mary Catherine did. And I say, more power to you. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I went from coding and putting as the author of the program Howard Stern to now we're creating podcasts for not only ourselves but other companies. So that's great.
You've done a little bit of everything in between.
Exactly. I've been a lot of zigs, a lot of zags over the years, but yeah. And one other thing, I love the book recommendations, The Big Leap. Stephen Pressfield's work, The Legend of Bagger Vance, one of my favorite books, and we talked about his other. Well, he has many great books, but the War of Art, which is fantastic for people. So anyhow, just really enjoyed MC. Joe, what would you like to end the episode with?
Well, I want to tell you, I finally broke down and I got a dog.
You did?
I got a dog, and I taught my dog how to play chess, which
Really?
I think that's pretty remarkable. But I tell you, he's not all that good at it. I can usually beat him 3 out of 4 games.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.